Let's start with a very interesting Reddit story from Mob Kurt, giving away a Master Sergeant's golf clubs. So many years ago, I was a logistician in the United States Marine Corps. My unit was headed overseas on a little mini deployment to Morocco. I was in charge of the logistics in my unit, even though I was only a corporal. This was because, first, we didn't have a staff sergeant to run the shop, and the sergeants we had were garbage at logistics and got put to work for me. So anyways, we're gearing up to go on this little mini deployment, and the Master Sergeant, who was going to be the highest ranking enlisted, comes over to my office to chat. He starts off being real cool and then eventually asks if he can bring his golf clubs with in one of our containers. I thought to myself that it would be wise to be on his good side since I was only a corporal and going on a deployment with his company. So I agreed, even though it was against the rules and regulations. However, everyone does it all the time. So anyways, we go to Morocco and he has his clubs. No course in sight, but he was happy hitting balls, so I didn't care. However, then everything changed. His Marines didn't request to bring enough materials to build what we were there for. They start saying, I'm missing a 20th container, which doesn't happen to me. So I finally solved the mystery. It turns out they didn't request to bring enough and left the materials behind their office. So here we are in Africa to do a job, but we don't have enough materials. So he tries to use me as a scapegoat. Even a gunnery sergeant and a staff sergeant of his get in on this and just treat me like because I refused to take the fall for their shop's up. This goes on for the entire 2 months we are there, and we are in the middle of nowhere, so nothing for me to do but deal. Anyways, we start heading home and we head back to civilization to a port, and we had to clean our gear to go back to the US as per customs and biosecurity. So we are cleaning everything. Even Tank had to take tanks off their tracks and clean the tracks. It was a pain in the ass, but still a cool experience. The problem, however, was that the Master Sergeant kept needing to reopen containers that had been finished. Now the problem with this was that we had to have actual US customs agents on site and use their banding seals to seal the containers, which then had to be documented with the unique serial number. Every time we had to open one, I had to beg the customs agents to open them and let us get whatever the MSgt needed, and them close it up without having to redo the cleaning. Normally, it is a solid no, but the agents were cool and we worked it out. Plus, every night I usually ran into them at the bars and I would buy them beer. It got to the point where the agents didn't even have any of their own seals left because of how many times we did it. They ended up using mine to reseal. It really made things difficult and it was often for dumb shit. So finally I had it. It was literally the last day we had for cleaning, and of course the MSGT wanted something else. So I asked the agents. They were really fed up of it. However, I then asked, do either of you guys golf? One of them said yes. I said, then we need 2 containers opened. So we got the dumb for the MSGT, then we went to the other container where I knew the MSGT's golf clubs were hiding. I opened the container, pulled out the clubs and gave them to the agent. He looked at me and I just said, I don't want to hear about opening any more containers. He was cool with it and got it in his car. No issues from there on. Anyways, we get back to the States and the ship pulls in with the gear and we got it home no problem. A week later, the MSGT comes in my office. He's all buddy-buddy again. He then asks where his golf clubs were. I said, my guess is your garage or your closet. He forces a chuckle and goes, haha, okay, come on, dog, where's my clubs? I then said, IDK, what you're talking about, MSG. He then said, my club's in the container. I then explained to him that per the Department of Transportation Regulation, Chapter 3, I even had it down to the subchapter and paragraph letter, that no personal gear can be shipped inside of military cargo containers. He then starts getting mad, and I keep repeating the paragraph. He loses it, grabs me, but my shop's guys got to him quick and pulled him off before he swung on me. He never did find out what I did to his clubs, and I left the unit about 6 months later to go to my next command. The revenge was perfect and executed flawlessly. The MSGT's arrogance and misuse of power were met with a clever retaliation. The next story is from an unknown user. Harass me, treat me like crap. That's going to cost you 5 years' salary. First, some background. A bit over 6 months prior to the start of this story, we had a change-up at the company I worked for. The old owner was a great guy that was retiring and handing the company off to his son, a real POS, just out of business school type. The son, with the mentality that the company is now his, went about restructuring, namely reassigning teams to different projects and leaving those that remained in their old positions to pick up double, if not triple, the workload. He did this all in the name of saving a little money. Unfortunately, my department, Safety Engineering, of which I was the team lead, was not spared from this effort. In the end, I had it out with the boss and department head, ultimately costing the company 3 months of my entire department working 80-plus hour weeks and forcing a huge year-end bonus to be paid out to us. Unfortunately, after my initial meeting with the new boss, i.e., the son, he took a liking to me, in a really bad way. Essentially, he really liked me and wanted to go out with me or sleep with me or however you want to put it. He even enlisted his friends and secretaries to help him. It went on for months, just blatant harassment. They even made comments about me losing my late husband, that I should just get back on the horse, so to speak. I kept everything, every email, every voicemail, and went to my best friend who happens to be a really good lawyer, a contract lawyer to be exact, so not exactly their area of expertise, but they knew enough to help. This friend drafted a letter to the boss, essentially a stop or we're going to start a big case over this kind of thing, and everything stopped. However, I was then moved from working in office to a work-from-home arrangement. I knew what was coming. They were going to do their best to get rid of me, so I started documenting everything. But as luck would happen, I received an email chain from the bosses. A good friend of mine in the office who was in the email chain added me to the CC list. And wouldn't you know, it was back and forth communication of them discussing how they would get rid of me and pin the blame on me. The email chain was just disgusting. They hated me so badly and wanted me gone, but because of my contract, they would have to buy me out. But being the cheapskates they are, they wanted me gone for free. So the company bosses started a campaign to try and torment me. They first tried to say that because now I work from home, they were required to install cameras in my home office to make sure I was being productive. Luckily, that did not work. You have to love contracts. They also tried assigning an impossible workload to me. But luckily, my team and I were almost like family and they picked up the slack. After 3 months of this crap, I get an email and a phone call from the HR department saying I was getting laid off indefinitely because there was just no work for me. This was complete given that we had several dozen projects we were working on. On a side note, in Ontario, there is no such thing as a layoff as, in the court's eyes, being laid off is considered an active dismissal, which is essentially the same as being fired. After this conversation with HR, I call my lawyer friend, almost in tears, just shouting, "Look what they are doing to me! Help!" She calms me down and tells me, "This is such a good thing. We have so much evidence against them." I had already forwarded and printed everything off that was sent to me, and it was lucky I did because a scant few hours after I was laid off, my computer was remotely wiped clean. Everything was gone, leaving just a blank desktop. When I called the HR department to get copies of all my filed complaints, what do you know? Everything was gone. In their place was a bunch of reprimands that never happened, that I never signed or saw, dating months and months back, and all signed by the new boss, despite the fact that they were dated before he ever took control of the company. It was clear they were total but I got copies of everything to add to my stack of records. I texted all my old colleagues to let them know what was happening and that I am basically gone. Like I said earlier, we were like family, and with me on the way out, they started looking for better employment. Not only that, but they contacted all their friends who worked for the company to do the same. I was laid off on a Monday, and on Thursday, I walked into the office with my employment lawyer. I swear, the main secretary was on the phone to security the second she saw me walk in. and they were at the door in a matter of a minute. My lawyer simply handed her a legal document, a summons to meet for mediation at his office on the next Friday. During the following week, I received so many calls and text messages from the bosses, friends, secretaries, and people I knew in the office to just be friendly with the owner, to just drop it, and that they wanted to bring me back and forget about everything. Like hell, I was going back to such a hostile work environment. Friday finally comes, and into my lawyer's office, my former boss walks in with a squad of 4 of his lawyers to settle the matter. And off the bat, he offers me 3 months severance to end all of this because I didn't have any evidence to rebut the fake paperwork they had on file. At this point, my lawyer starts to bring out all the paperwork we had, namely copies of every complaint I had ever filed, which were all signed by the bosses, HR, and myself. Luckily for our case, I had made sure to take a copy of each complaint when it was written up. They didn't think I had anything? Oh boy, were they wrong. My lawyer made the case that in court it'd be obvious that all the paperwork they had on their end were forgeries. Nothing was signed by me, and he pointed out that there were dates with the boss's signature where he wasn't in the country, let alone working for the company yet. At that point, the boss and his lawyers went to speak privately. After about a half an hour, they came back with a much better offer, a full year's salary. But my lawyer was like, nah, we'll just go with what the contract says, plus go for damages in court. Given the recent changeover at the company, the lawyers seemed to know they couldn't afford this going to court, not to mention it would be so bad for the company's reputation. So they basically rolled over and asked, "What do you want?" We demanded 5 years' salary, plus the average bonus I would have made for each year, plus all the legal fees paid. It was a big, big win. But it didn't end there. I got a taste of blood and wanted more. I made phone calls to several companies where I had contacts and found jobs for every member of my team, and several members of other teams. By the end of a week, the company lost 10 of its most talented people. Not to mention most of those people had friends and colleagues that ended up following them to their new employers. The fallout was pretty bad. Before all of this, they had the pick of the litter when new university students graduated. But now, because they lost almost all of their senior people, they had no one to mentor new employees. Plus, word got out fast how they treat workers like crap, so no one with any talent would even think of getting near the company. As of today, the company is just a shell of its former self. It's still big, but it bleeds money. They also now have a problem with permanent staffing and are paying out the nose to hire subcontractors. Let's just say they don't make money like they used to. In fact, they have not started any new projects in something like 9 months. If something isn't done on the side of management to improve things fast, they will likely be going bankrupt in the very near future. Edit. I didn't really think this post would blow up. It is still happening fairly recently, like I have really loved Reddit. I just never thought I was interesting enough to actually share anything. But I am glad I have. It's been a great place to get things off my chest. Also, the fact people have enjoyed reading stories from my life has just made it so much better. Taking down Queen Karen, President of the HOA. Okay, this happened years ago, 1985 to be exact. I was 45 when this happened, 81 now. So after my second retirement, I started doing property management. I bought this 2,500 square foot luxury home with the sole intention of renting it out. Now I didn't know how bad the HOA was, but when I became the owner, I soon found out. This all took place in 2 years' time. Karen would literally have a problem with everyone in the neighborhood. Trash cans left out? Fined. Loud music after 10 p.m? Fined. Yard sale without permission? Fine. Removing dead plants and replanting without approval? You get fined. It went on and on like this. Now the community could run for the HOA board, but the HOA board chose the president. 6 out of the 10 members on the board liked Karen, so she always kept her job. Her husband was in the medical field, so he made a lot of money. It got to a point too where she was called Queen Karen in the neighborhood, and her dishing out HOA fines. Now I used to go in person to collect the rent, because the people that rented my house were good friends of mine. I did this for months, so I would park my car by the front of the garage. I and my friends were having some music on, but it wasn't that loud. Queen Karen came over driving her golf cart and said, "Queen Karen, excuse me?" Me, "Yeah?" Queen Karen, "You have to turn that music down, it's too loud." I told her that it was 8 p.m. and that music that's even loud can be played until 10. She wasn't having it and demanded that I do so. Now my friends and I kept the music going and we were enjoying ourselves. She proceeded to get angry and fined me. Now, most people will just take the abuse and pay the fine, but not me. I went to the HOA board, contested the fine, and won. From that point on, Queen Karen made it her personal mission to destroy me. She would bitch and fuss about every little thing. I fought what I could, but I did end up paying for some of it. She also went after my tenants, which made things worse for me. I had a sit down with my friends one night to discuss the problem. When I parked my car, Queen Karen came over in her robe and said I have to park somewhere else. I did because I didn't want to start anything. We see her go back into her house and embrace a man that isn't her husband. We were being noisy and we came to the conclusion that she was cheating on her husband. Spoiler alert, she was. My friends and I told Queen Karen's husband. I'm sure he did some investigation because 3 months later they divorced and he was moving his stuff out. Now gossip said that Queen Karen got nothing because she was the one that cheated and she didn't have a job. So she wasn't entitled to the money. From this point on, Queen Karen had a massive decline in the quality of life that she had. She sold her car and got a cheaper one, and she adopted different dressing habits. But even after the divorce, she never got a job, and she was still living somewhat better than everyone else. Fast forward to 1986. In February, Queen Karen and the HOA had been giving out fines for very obscure things and increased monthly dues. Having trash cans out a couple of hours early or after the trash man left would result in a fine. Targeting people that had older or dirty cars goes on and on. Me and the other people, the community, were sick of the crap that she and the HOA were pulling. So at the next meeting, we made our voices our concerns. Queen Karen said that the community had been falling behind on repairs and that the dues and increase in fines were necessary, especially if people weren't maintaining their own property. She said that it was in the yearly budget report and that we should have read it. The other pissed residents, and I go and read the statement. Now none of us read it because we take it as a junk mail and disregard it. But we read the whole statement cover to cover. Queen had increased the HOA budget 15%, and where that extra money was going remained unknown. We went over to her house the next day and demanded to know where the extra money was being spent. But she refused several times. She closed the door and went back to watching TV. We filing a joint lawsuit to find out where the money was going. In June, we found out. Cue the revenge. Queen Karen was living off HOA fines and dues. The increase is because she was running out of money. She still didn't have a job, so she embezzled from the HOA so she wouldn't have to get a job. She gets busted. We called the police for her embezzling the money. She was charged with fraud and extortion. The neighbours and I filed a joint lawsuit against Karen to get reimbursement as well. Because she had no money, so she had to mortgage her house to pay us all. She later went to federal prison for 6 years with no parole. Because she went away, no one was paying on her house. The bank foreclosed on it and it was bought by someone else. So when she got out in 1992, she was homeless. Honestly, the majority of us didn't want to ruin her life like this. Had she toned down the excessive fines, we would have let her be. But she had to double down and steal from us because she didn't want to get a job like everyone else. Edit. Okay, I didn't think that I would have to explain this, but no, I didn't call Queen Karen a Karen in 1985. I just used the name here because I've been told that is what you call an undesirable noisy white lady. I can't use her real name for privacy, so I named her that for the purpose of this story. The revenge was both clever and fitting, perfect in every aspect. Queen Karen's actions caught up to her in a spectacular way, not just by being exposed, but also by causing her financial ruin and downfall. The next story is from Joshua. Talk to me anyway, you please? Nah. Have fun losing the entire staff along with the juiciest of juicy contracts. This is a super throwback. but it still brings a smile to my face. Also, my writing sucks, so please excuse the grammatical errors. I was a rink rat growing up. The only day I wasn't in the skating rink were the adult and gay nights. Calm down, it was the 90s, and that's literally what it was called. Friday night, Saturday morning, and night. Along with Sunday morning and night, I was there. Hell, I didn't even leave between the morning and night sessions. I even went Tuesday nights as well. I was serious too. I dove deep into speed skating and not trying to toot my own horn, but I was pretty good and well known. Anyway, I'd been going to this specific skating rink for years and knew everyone. One day, it was right before I started 7th grade, the owner came up to me and asked me to go out onto the rink floor and tell some kids to slow down. I did and came back, and he asked me how would I like to make $7.50 an hour, to which I responded, "Do I also get in for free?" He laughed and said, "Of course." Boom! First job, and I wanted to be there anyway, so it was the biggest win-win of all time for me. To say I loved it was an understatement, and I did everything besides work the snack bar. DJ, skate counters, floor guard, janitor, hype man, you name it, and I did it. It was some of the greatest times of my life. So much fun, and the owner was super awesome. Also, we were paid under the table, so getting an envelope full of cash every week just felt like a bonus for having fun. To me, it wasn't a job, it was pure fun. It also helped that all my friends were regulars as well. A few years go by and the owner sold to another guy, who we will call Tim. Tim could be an absolute nightmare to work for. He changed the entire dynamic of the place and everyone felt it. Now, this skating rink was popular and extremely old. Lots of people all over the city knew of it. My mum and aunt skated there when they were kids, if that tells you anything. Some way or another, the new owner set up a juicy deal that had the rink started making a load of money. On Saturday night from 7-Eleven, it was skating per usual, but from 11 2-ish, 3-ish was a club. A local hip-hop station came in there with local label Swish House and turned the place upside down for those few hours. Every week, and the place was poppin'. There must have been over 2K people in there on average, and at $20 per person, it adds up quick. Plus, the snack bar would never stop turning out food and drink. We were making stupid money. Bonus. We also found some good stuff when cleaning up as well. Money, knives, weed, jewelry. It was awesome. So Tim has it made, but sometimes he would fly off the handle for little things. All of us weren't sure what his deal was, but he would explode out of nowhere and start talking all kinds of nonsense. I'd started to have enough because we all had worked there for many years without issue. One night, he went too far. I don't like being called outside of my name. It's a respect thing. My own mother didn't do it, and he for sure wasn't. For context, I was in 10th grade now. One night, he was in some kind of mood, and for whatever reason was taking it out on everyone. I don't remember the exact situation, but he started freaking out on me at about 11:30 p.m. Now, Slim Thug and Paul Wall were in the building that night, so the place was extra packed. Why, more than usual, I'm sure we were breaking all kinds of fire marshal rules, LOL. He went ballistic and called me every name in the book, while I just stood there with rage building up in me. I'd had enough. For years, this place ran flawlessly, and everyone loved us, so he really didn't have a good reason to treat us in the manner he did. My plan was formed. I immediately gathered everyone else that was working, and we all decided that enough was enough. It was time for a lesson. I assembled the entire crew, and we'll all quit on the spot. All of us. That meant nobody to serve food, clean, help the Swisher House people, or just carry out general things that needed to be done when 2-3K people were in the building. He was stunned, his tone changed, and he became very sweet. We weren't having it. As an additional you, I called the other 2 people that were off, and they showed up to quit as well. Tim had already reached out, so he assumed they were showing up to work. Nope. We left him with 0 workers on the absolute busiest of busy nights, and boy did it implode. He couldn't find anyone to work, so the place went to absolute shit that night. The on-duty officer told him he needed to figure something out or he was going to close it down without workers. Well, he didn't. It closed down that night, and apparently without staff, it got nasty. People started having smoking, trashing the place and all kinds of stuff. Shortly after, the radio station and label took their business elsewhere, and not long afterward, the place closed down. He lost his entire investment. This was very bittersweet for me because I loved the place, but he ran it into the ground. The building is still standing, and I would love to bring it back to its former glory, but my pockets are deep enough yet. Maybe one day. TLDR. New skating rink owners treated employees horrible, so we all quit at the same exact time to leave him stranded. He lost a big contract with a local radio station and popular record label, which cost him big money. Rink closed down shortly after. Clarification edit. So, allow me to clarify some concerns. First off, this was a skating rink, so no alcohol. I've never seen a skating rink serve alcohol, LOL. The club night was only Saturdays. This never happened in any other day. Ever. Yes, it was insanity packed. When I say there were a lot of people, it's an understatement. Also, the parking lot in front of the building was crawling with people, and so was the one to the right of the building, which had a supermarket. A ton of people parked there, so the party overflowed. The people were allowed to walk in and out with the wristbands. I know the amount of people was excessive because the building had 4 AC system, but only 2 worked, so we would go outside through the night to cool off because the heat was overwhelming. Hence the reason customers could come and go. Yes, the crew quit. 3 of us lived on the same block and were childhood friends. The others went way back, and when I say this owner ran the place down, he ran the place down, so it wasn't a hard sell. It was no longer a fun place to work, and eventually that bled over into the customers not wanting to come back. There is another person in the comment who worked with me, and he can back it up. Yes, I was hired when I was 13, 14-ish. Yes, I was getting paid under the table. Yes, I was in middle school when I started and worked there till either the summer after 9th grade or during 10th grade. It was more than 20 years ago. Can't remember exact dates for the hair splitters. Seeing as how 3 of us lived on the same block, getting a ride wasn't a problem, and eventually we all started driving. So yeah, old enough. Yes, local radio station and local record label put on the shows. Underground hip-hop starts, that are insanely popular here still, were present every Saturday, which drew huge crowds. The other Redditor in here was the one I called, which was at about 12 a.m, and he got out of bed to come and quit. We all went to Denny's to celebrate afterwards. The revenge was flawless. It was calculated, collective, and perfectly executed, hitting Tim where it hurt most. It is satisfying to see Tim losing his staff and deal with the radio station.